Now, each of these methods have certain strengths and weaknesses to them, and your book talks a little bit about this. For experiments, the major strength is that the research is conducted usually in a controlled laboratory environment, all right? And the strength of that is that it prevents other social factors from interfering with your results, all right? Because what you're doing is you're trying to eliminate outside factors that might skew your study of violent video games and aggressive behavior. Now, the weakness of experiments is that a lot of times it's very difficult to generalize the results of your experiment to people's everyday life, all right? Because the experiment is often conducted in very artificial surroundings. So, in other words, just because the subjects in your experiment that played violent video games seem to be aggressive in some laboratory setting, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that people that play violent video games in their everyday life are going to be as aggressive or violent, because the situations are very different. Now, the strength of survey research is that you're able to get a broader cross-section of people and a larger number of people in your survey, so that ideally you can have a representative sample so that the results of your survey can be generalized to some broader population. So that if you conduct your survey well, the results of your study of, 500, 1,000, 2,000 people could conceivably be applied to people in society more generally. And also, the survey does not have the weakness of the experiments that it's not conducted in some artificial setting, right, where it might be more difficult to generalize to people's everyday life. Now, the main weakness of much survey research is that it is very difficult to demonstrate that one thing affects or causes another thing to happen. It's difficult to establish a causal relationship between one variable and another. So again, in our particular example of video games and aggressive behavior, it's difficult to prove, it's difficult to actually show in your survey that violent video games, your independent variable, caused a person's aggressive behavior, the dependent variable. Instead, the best that survey research can really hope for is to show some correlation between these two variables or factors, to show that these seem to be related. So, for instance, your survey research may show that people that play more violent video games tend to be the same people that are more aggressive or violent in everyday life. But the thing is that you can only show that those things are somehow related. You can't really prove definitively with a basic survey that it was the violent video games that caused the aggressive behavior. In fact, it might have been the other way around. It might be that people that have a personality type that's predisposed towards aggression might be drawn to the violent video games in the first place. All right, so there's a question there about what's affecting what. However, survey research still can determine that these things, these factors, these variables are somehow related to each other. With content analysis, The strength is that you are investigating more specifically media content. You're not just making broad assertions about whether or not media content is violent or how it's violent, but you are investigating systematically aspects of that media content to provide us with empirical information about how many acts of violence and what types of acts of violence are represented in media content, in this case, violent video games. Now, the main weakness of content analysis is pretty obvious here in that it doesn't really tell us anything about influence or impact. Content analysis is confined to the media content itself. So we don't know anything from just the content analysis about how a person is affected by, say, violent video games. All we really know from content analysis is just how violent the video games are. So that while a content analysis is certainly valuable, it has to be complemented with other types of research methods that look more specifically at the impact and influence of the media content on particular individuals. Now, as a result of extensive research into media effects over the past several decades, researchers have developed some more sophisticated theories about how media affect individuals. And these theories tend to be somewhat more nuanced than some of the cruder early theories like the hypodermic needle theory. The social learning theory argues that in some instances, people learn how to imitate what they see, hear, or read from media. That, for instance, a young child may learn how to imitate the acts of violence and aggression that child sees on a TV show. Now, social learning theory argues that this process of imitating what one encounters from media is a four-step process. First, the person has to be made aware of a particular type of behavior. All right, so this is attention, all right, where a person pays attention to acts of violence being represented on a TV show or in a film. And then the second step in this process is retention. The media consumer has to remember, all right, the particular behavior or act that he or she observed on television or in other media. The child has to remember the acts of violence that we're seeing on a cop show or a cartoon. Third, the individual media user has to be able to reproduce these acts that we're seeing on TV or encountered in media. So this step is referred to as motor reproduction, right, where the person has to have the ability to copy what or imitate what was seen in media, such as reproducing the acts of aggression that were portrayed. And then finally, the fourth step in this process is motivation, right? There has to be some reason for the individual media user to imitate or copy this this behavior in real life, right? So there has to be, for instance, something to get somebody all worked up about for the person to imitate the act of violence that was seen in or encountered in the media. Right? There has to be some motivating factor, all right, to encourage this imitation. So again, more generally, social learning theory argues that people have the capacity to imitate what they see or encounter in media. Another more recent media effects theory is referred to as agenda setting. This theory argues that media set the agenda for what we talk about or discuss in society, right? That by virtue of news media covering certain stories more heavily, that primes people to be more concerned about those topics, right? So, for instance, if there winds up being a lot of news media coverage of the Middle East or the war in Afghanistan, all right, then people wind up being more concerned about that. Or if TV news provides more coverage of President Obama's health care reform, all right, that will lead people to focus more attention on that topic. So media's influence is to set the agenda for important issues for us to consider. Now, agenda setting as a perspective has one important qualification, all right? Agenda setting does argue that media help establish an agenda of issues and topics for the public to be concerned about. However, agenda setting does not argue that the media tell people what to think about on those issues, all right? So that even though the news media may be providing more coverage of Afghanistan and U.S. military intervention in Afghanistan, the media does not influence the audience to either be for or against that war, that military intervention. All the media does under agenda setting is to put that topic more in front of the public so that the public is more aware of that topic and is thinking about it more. What particular perspective a person takes on these topics is still up to the individual media user and is not influenced in a substantive way by the media. So that's what agenda setting